Heath. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to chat with you. And what we're doing in these conversations is we want to highlight some of the amazing people and companies behind the work we do. And, I think when I think about our industry and our field and what we do is amazing, right? We're helping people have families, and there couldn't be a more beautiful purpose. But to make that happen, it takes a lot of really dedicated and hardworking people who are really passionate about that purpose because it's a lot. Right? And it's amazing. So I'm excited to chat with you. We've worked with Same Love for a long time, and I'm excited to chat and learn more about you, the organization, and then more broadly the industry. Do you want to start by introducing yourself and a bit about the agency?
Yeah, happy to. So, my name is Heath Tucker. I am the Director of Intended Parent Services here with Same Love Surrogacy. I have been working for the agency for a little over 5 years now. I have been a participant in the agency for a couple of years before that because this is the agency I used to have my journey with my husband. We've had two children through this process, so we are parents, former intended parents, but now we are officially parents. So yeah, we found this organization, found Same Love, and loved what they stood for. The agency, I say we now because I am here, but I also view them as the people who helped me create my family as well. So, I mean, we were founded over 11 years ago by gay men that, saw what his journey was like and wanted to build a better mousetrap, right? Just build something that was better for people and based upon their experience and was really catered towards servicing our community, the LGBTQ plus community. So that's something that 11 years in, 700 plus births later, I'm proud to say is
Oh,
about 90% of our business is still LGBTQ plus. We help all families, but our focus and mission from the beginning has always been to help our community in the process. So yeah, and how I was here, how I got brought in is because, well, I asked a lot of questions, I think, during my journey. I was the annoying IP that constantly had questions, which we love. We love them. We love answering questions. But I definitely had a lot. And I think that Brad, our owner, looked at me and was like, this guy's got a lot of questions. Maybe I should look to expand the conversation with him. And I was excited for the opportunity to work here because my background when I was living in New York City at the time was in fighting for marriage equality. So I had been fighting for our community for many, many years, putting together protests and rallies. You can find photos of me online with a bullhorn and long hair down to my shoulders. And so that happened. We got marriage equality, and then I kind of was like, okay, what's the next chapter of my life from there? And then I found Same Love, and we used them, and the opportunity came for me to work here and to help other families like myself um, to have kids through this process. And I now get to show my son and my daughter photos of me with long hair and a bullhorn at protests and rallies, and then I can show them the hundreds of babies I've personally helped bring into the world. So it's kind of like a nice full circle moment for me joining the agency. So yeah.
I love that. What are some things you mentioned the focus of the agency? Can you share some other things that make the agency unique or different or special in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot about Same Love Surrogacy that does make it unique. I mean, our name is a little misleading because we are technically Same Love Surrogacy, but we also do egg donation. That is part of what we do as well. So we're able to kind of facilitate all parts of the process. I always describe an agency, for lack of a better description, as a project manager, right? And part of being a project manager is seeing you from start to finish or from wherever you decide to onboard us. So we're capable of helping somebody select their egg donor all the way through birth and post-birth, right? And I think that that is not something that all agencies are able to offer. I also just think that we offer the unique perspective of having been founded by intended parents. I think a lot of other agencies come to fruition in different manners. A lot of them are, surrogates who've done journeys before, egg donors. Sometimes it's attorneys who've decided that, hey, I was practicing law in this area, but hey, we could also open up an agency. There's not a ton of them that are founded by intended parents. So I think that definitely makes us unique. It also changed the way in which we structured the agency. We kind of took the legal approach and realized from a legal perspective, everybody has representation in the process. So why don't we try to replicate that on the agency side? So our egg donors, they have a coordinator that has been an egg donor themselves that's dedicated to them. Surrogates, they have people who've been surrogates multiple times, helping guide them through this process. And we have people working for us that have been head nurses at some of the top IVF clinics that are now coordinators and directors of the program for us. And then for the IP side, all of the cases are managed right now. All of our case coordinators, we are parents, gay men, parents through this process, right? So we ourselves were intended parents. Now, when we're managing a case, we manage it collectively, but I think it's good for you as an intended parent to have a fellow intended parent in this process to be able to talk to. Same with the surrogate and the egg donor. I just think that there's a lot of value in the shared experience, right? Because we're creating human life, right? I don't want to lose sight of the human aspect of it, and connection is a big part of humanity. And so I think that's something that we do that's different. We also have you supported by a case manager from beginning to end. So who you meet with is who's with you throughout the entire journey, which is great. I know sometimes it's just you have an intake person and then they filter you on to others, which that's a lovely structure to have. We're kind of comfortable being there in the middle. We're not the largest agency. We're not the smallest. We're a niche category because of the community that we serve. So I think that that in itself sets us apart. Adding to that, I think that the types of egg donors and surrogates that come to our agency are different than perhaps a traditional agency that focuses more on assisting heterosexual clients. Because our egg donors, our surrogates, they come here knowing who we are and who we help and really wanting to help that community. And I think that that's a big advantage for people when they're working with us is that they have surrogates who want to work with us. I also think that it's kind of an advantage for heterosexual clients that sign up with us as well, because we still, like I said, we serve all families, all types, singles, couples, all of it. I think a lot of heterosexual couples who are referred to us by third-party providers like clinics, attorneys, escrow, things like that, they're coming to us because they also think they value the type of surrogate and egg donors that we attract and how they're viewing this process. So I think that that's something that as we were forming the agency, I don't think we realized that was going to be what came because of it, but it's definitely one of the big advantages that we have. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot that sets us apart, I feel
Of
like,
course, yeah.
but yeah, those are some of the things.
I think I heard a thread in there of that, that is something I value a lot in this space. And I think if a friend were to ask me, I would say, look, pick an agency you connect with, right? Pick an agency and people at an agency that you like and you want to work with. Because this is it's a long process and it's a very personal process. And the agency is your number one advocate that's going to be alongside of you through the whole process. So you got to find a company and a team that you connect with personally, because this is a very personal process and there's a relationship that's necessary for it to go as well as it can.
Yeah, I think you're 100% nail on the head there because I talk about that a lot, right? I talk about feeling the connection with somebody. I think it's valuable, right? I think that again, it's not lost on me, and I hope it's not lost on everybody participating that we're creating human life here, right? And so part of that is the humanity of it. And part of that is, yeah, we're going to be hanging out with each other for well over a year, right? Once you're even started, like there's a lot that goes into this. So you kind of want to like who's working with you, right? And that extends beyond just the agency. That's your clinics, your attorneys, your escrow, every participant that you're working with. We really want to build that team with you to be able to create a good environment. Because listen, whenever somebody ultimately doesn't sign up with our agency, if I'm not the person you vibe with or one of our other coordinators isn't, I'm okay with that, right? Like if that's truly what it is, then I like the idea that you're drawn to me, right? And what you trust in me, because trust is a key component of this entire process with everybody involved, right? Right? We have to trust that our clinic is doing what they need to do. We have to trust that our attorneys, that our escrow, that our agencies, that our surrogates, that our egg donors, that our intended parents, everybody has to trust And that's probably one of the things that, I know, we talk about advice that we give. If you can find your way to trust sooner rather than later, this process will be a much better and exciting process for you. But part of that is from the very beginning, finding people that you vibe with and therefore trust because you vibe with them. So I think absolutely, I would 100% agree with what you said there.
Yeah, I think as you talk about the broader team of people and that element of trust, it couldn't be more important. It does take a lot of providers and a lot of professionals and a team of people around every journey for it to go successful. And I think this element that we're talking about is how smooth or how happy the journey can be if you're surrounded by people you like and trust, that you feel like you connect with, that have your best interest at heart, which hopefully the team you pick do. Then it makes it go better. It really does. And I think that team and that trust really comes into play when there is misunderstandings or problems. Most journeys go beautifully, but
Yeah.
this is a complex process and a scientific process that has a lot of emotion involved in and around it too. So there can be misunderstandings, there could be issues. These things happen. When those things happen, that core team you have and the trust in that team and their ability to stand with you or guide through those scenarios is absolutely critical.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, the thing where I think people go wrong, right, is viewing this as though this process, obviously, it's got elements that many people have not encountered before, right? But the simple structure of, common existence still is the same. And I think the number one thing that if you're single and you have friends, or you're coupled and you have your partner and things like that, the number one element that makes any of those work well is communication, right? And if
Yeah.
you're not communicating effectively, this applies to us, this applies to all categories, right? Then that's where your misunderstandings happen, right? Is because of communication. I think what we always try to advocate for whenever we're having matches, like we really front load a lot of information to people. Maybe all too much. But we then front load it, but then still pepper it reminders throughout the entire journey as well. But I think some people shy away from front loading intended parents, surrogates, and egg donors with information because it is overload. But I think it's important that we talk about all those things and we talk about the key elements of it. And communication is when we start off a match call, that's the first topic we discuss is what does communication look like to you, right? And what does it look like with somebody who don't even know, as a complete stranger to you? What does communication look like? And kind of beating home baseline expectations, right? Like we need to establish baseline. Obviously, things will happen throughout the process. Your relationship and your communication style will grow organically. But there are some basic things that need to happen, right? If an appointment happens and you're the only person who attended that appointment, IPs weren't able to make it. Unfortunately, you are put in the position of being the only one with the information that we need in that moment, the firsthand information, right? So communication is key in that. Communicating how you're feeling or how someone made you feel in a situation. It can get a little uncomfortable when it's someone who listen, we've got genetic material that we're carrying for somebody, so I don't want to put us in the strangers category because we're moved a little bit beyond that, but we're not probably best friends yet. So you're still feeling that out, right? It's a complicated relationship because most people don't move that quickly with strangers, right? Relationships don't foster that quickly most of the time. And here, because of the element of time and everyone's chasing the clock, there's not a lot of getting to know you. We try to bake that in for people, but that's again where we go back to just feeling it out and seeing are the individuals involved? Does the surrogate feel she can trust the intended parents? Does the intended parent feel they can trust the surrogate, right? And then building the communication from there. So, yes, misunderstandings, they do happen. To your point, I don't want to be the big scary one in the room because you said something that I thought was valuable, which is most journeys go pretty smoothly, right? If we're looking at it purely on a statistic standpoint, right? They go smoothly. But usually smooth journeys aren't how someone defines how good they actually are, right? That's just, unfortunately, sometimes it's just the luck of things. Some journeys just go
Right.
smooth. Sometimes they don't, right? And that's where you have to do it. But I don't want it to not go smooth because expectations weren't established clearly from the beginning, or someone has deviated from expectations, right? That's where it gets a little tricky. Results, whether or not you're pregnant, whether or not you find success in this journey or not, that is a bit outside of most people's control. What we can, make sure is right is how we're working together whenever good things happen and whenever bad things happen, right? So it's really finding your way through both of those things. So,
Yeah, and I think if you select, from what we see, if you have the right partner and particularly the right agency, when things don't go as planned or they are more challenging or things come up, the right agency makes such a big difference in guiding people through that. Because if both sides trust the agency and the agency is acting in the best interest of the journey to the overall successful outcome, and everybody trusts that, it can stop a lot of those tough conversations. One of the things we see on the escrow side is a lot of times tension arises around just a misunderstanding, and sometimes it can be as simple as a calculation or not really understanding the process or that was going to be in there, and having the professionals, including us, saying, "Hey, this is what how this is normal and this is how it's calculated." And having that buffer between this parent and the surrogate makes such a big difference. And the escrow companies play a role in that sometimes. The attorneys do sometimes. The other professionals sometimes do, but the agency's in that role all the time is that in between. And if they do a good job, it allows the relationship to be better because those misunderstandings don't create tension between the two parties.
right.
It seems that way from an escrow provider's perspective. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I definitely think that the agency does get called upon probably the most out of all the players, because oftentimes we're asked to wear multiple hats. Now, those hats, I always say, I am not a medical professional, I am not a financial advisor, I am not these things, but I have experience, right? You don't go to the stranger who doesn't have any knowledge and ask for their opinion, probably. You go to somebody who is experienced. Now, granted, the experience might not be that they went to 5 years of school to get some financial licensing degree or anything like that. But I at least understand from experience in other cases that I manage how I can advise. So, agency is definitely getting brought in to resolve conflict. Fortunately enough, conflict is fairly minimal, but when it does come up, I think that we view it as the journey takes a new shape, right? You're not the intended parents, you're not the surrogate, it's the journey that we're managing at that point, right? So it's really trying to figure out for this particular journey and the players involved, what is the best path forward, right? Is there because it's not about winning. And I think that's where people get a little bit confused in sort of argument. It's all about winning. Well, they're not supposed to do that. Well, okay. Let's look at this a little differently, right? Let's frame it up. This isn't, I know uh, lots of times we're having to defend ourselves in an argument. You do want to come out the victor, but it extends beyond that. We got a baby here, right?
Yeah, great.
Look out for that. This isn't as simple as somebody said you're not supposed to do that and they did it, right? So it is looking at the whole picture and making sense of it and having conversations and making people understand the other person's perspective. And that goes both sides, right? Getting the surrogate to understand why this financial thing might be a concern for the intended parents, getting the intended parents to understand why this particular need from the surrogate facilitates her life because she's got children. You don't yet, right? That's the real challenge, right? Is a
Right.
lot of people don't have kids. So I was guilty of it myself. So it's difficult to put yourself in the shoes of what it is like to be the other person. And it's really, you have to approach this and be a really well-rounded person, I think. And unfortunately, most of us are not. So we do have to navigate that sometimes about finding how to get everyone to understand the other person's side.
That's great advice. Speaking of advice, I think this is a really cool opportunity just to discuss, you know, what's the top thing you would advise if an intended parent came to you and said, "What's the top few things I really should know or take into consideration before starting a journey?" What would they be?
I don't want to sound like a broken record because I'm pretty sure everybody says the same things on this, but cost and timeline are kind of the two considerations. And I'm not even talking timeline from a perspective of an agency's waitlist time, right? I'm talking general expectations on how long this process takes outside of the agency's wait time, right? And just letting people understand the time that it can take. Obviously, waitlist times have an impact on it, but truthfully, that's not usually the biggest kicker, right? It takes 4 to 5 months to create embryos and get your results back, right? It takes 4 to 5 months from a match until a transfer. It takes 9 months of pregnancy. Those are hard numbers. Yeah, that's not really changing, right? The only variable, right, is your wait time. But don't chase the wait time because it's probably interchangeable, right? I think most agencies, there are some that have really high wait times, there are some that have really low wait times, right? I think finding an agency that's kind of there in the middle is probably giving you a realistic understanding of what this process looks like, right? So a timeline, I think, is key. Realizing that you really can't make it from start to finish. And probably less than like a year and a half, I'd say, would probably be the fastest start to finish you're probably going to get. And that's because that's assuming everything goes right, which hopefully it does. And for a lot of people, it does. But there's usually, even in a journey where everything feels like it's going right, there are still speed bumps, right? I experienced that firsthand in my own personal journey, right? The first donor that we selected, right? She was lovely. We loved her. She was part of the LGBTQ plus family. She had been a sound designer at UCSD. My husband and I, our background was in theater, right? And so we were like, she's amazing. So many things. Now, granted, my husband did not select her profile initially because it had a cat in it and he's allergic to cats. And so I was like, but get out of here. But road bump number one, right? She went in, she had her evaluation performed. Her follicle count was good enough for maybe if one of us was donating, but we were both planning on donating, right? So back to the drawing board right out the gate. So timeline, I love that most everybody coming in is usually chasing the clock. And I get it. A lot of people are coming here and they've had unfortunate circumstances that have led them to going down this path, right? Of family creation, right? Difficulty getting pregnant themselves, right? Complications with being in the adoption world for many, many years and then finding out that that finish line, they can't see it, right? So most everybody is usually already behind whatever societal pressure they placed on themselves to achieve what they wanted to achieve. So it's getting people to realize that it's not about racing to the finish line. It's about getting there effectively, right? So timeline, right? There you go. Long-winded answer there. Other is cost. I think we, mainly because I pushed for it, right? Early on, I think that in my conversations with all the different agencies I was looking at when I was going through the process, I felt like costs were all over the place, right, for what it was. And that's because I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional. I'm not making any assumptions of any sort of, devious behavior, but no one was really providing what the full picture really looked like, right? Because I think if you provide the full picture of what the costs actually look like, it's scary. I know. I did it twice, and I'm not an attorney. I'm not a doctor, right? I am perfectly middle class. And my husband is as well, right? So for me, I value the financial conversation and know what that means but I also don't shy away and pretend like it costs any less than it actually does. So we try to be very transparent about the cost by making in estimates for clinics, right? What the variable costs are. A lot of agencies don't talk about the variable cost. I highlight that very specifically. I've made everybody else on the team highlight it whenever they're doing consults as well, because I do want to be transparent about cost, because it is not inexpensive. Now, there are obviously places out there where you can go and seek financial assistance, right? There's organizations that will support you in this process and provide some grants or partnerships with particular agencies, clinics. But the bulk of the money does come from you saving, right? Friends and family. There are opportunities for loans out there as well. But yes, cost and timeline are the two biggest considerations I would say most intended parents need to think of before they start this process.
I love that you talked about fixed and variable cost. having people truly understanding the not just the fixed and variable, but also the timeline of cost and funding is really important. They have their head around that fully and go into it knowing what they're expected. Just can lower that the financial tension or stress. There's already enough given the dollar amount. I just also want to discuss something you said there. I think is really important. I think you said you're squarely middle class, or you and your husband worked hard to save the money and to pursue your journey to build your family. And from where I sit in the industry, seeing a lot of journeys and knowing a lot of parents, and that's most of our intended parents. I think there's a misconception that surrogacy is for the rich and famous, and I think that's because those cases get a lot of attention. But the overwhelming majority of people pursuing surrogacy are everyday normal people. And because that's the majority of the population, and fertility doesn't discriminate, right? And all types of people need surrogacy, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't care what level of income you have. If, and all people of all levels of society want families, right? And so I think it's really neat that you said that, and it's something I struggle with, kind of like when you think big picture, like the celebrity cases get the attention and can paint a bad picture for surrogacy. But on the other side, they also bring a lot of awareness to the industry of like this exists and it's out there. How do you think about that?
Yeah, listen, I think that awareness is key in anything. I think surrogacy for a long time was kind of flying under the radar, right? I mean, the reality is, right? It really truly was. And I think, again, the Kardashians came along and really ramped up the focus on surrogacy, right? I think they were really the first like real big story that did it. Maybe I'm showing my age. I don't know. Maybe I'm young or old. I don't know. I'm right there in the middle. I feel like I don't know if I'm young or old yet.
It's hard
But
when you're kind of in that transition of becoming old, right? No longer the young guy.
right around the corner. But no, I think that I'm okay with surrogacy, being featured and getting highlighted because I think that my hope is that it actually brings more advocacy and it brings more structure to the industry too, right? Because I think that, I do want to make this more achievable for the middle class, right? You're right. We do. We're not working just exclusively with high wage earners, right? I've helped teachers become parents. I've helped social workers become parents. I've helped people in all different facets of life become parents. I became a parent, right? So, I mean, the reality is not everyone who coming here is bankrolling this process, right? They are looking for the support of friends. They're looking for the support of family, or they knew that this is something they wanted to do for a long time and they saved for it, right? So I don't take that lightly. And I definitely, you talked about it like fixed, variable, catastrophic. When I talk about cost, I talk about all three categories. I like people to know the catastrophic so they can know where the sleeping giants lie. I don't want them to budget for it, but I want them to know what can go wrong and what would have the biggest price tag on it. But then I talk about fixed and variable so that they can budget accordingly and so that they're not, because the worst thing that you can do is set somebody up who is financially right in the middle and set them up to be stressed throughout the process. Whenever something does go awry or they get a bill that they weren't expecting and they're like, that wasn't in my calculation, right? I want you to be able to enjoy the journey and not stress about the financial aspects of things because I did throughout my entire journey. And I always say to people, if you are a type A individual, this will be a challenging journey for you. Uh, well, I try to talk to people when I'm onboarding and doing all that, how to find the path forward that allows them to enjoy the process. If that's just strictly control aspects, if it's a financial aspect, whatever it is, I try to guide them through that. Um, in terms of back to what you asked about celebrities, yes, I don't mind if we have attention on the industry, and I welcome it. Um, other than current present things that are stressful in terms of the industry with certain aspects of things that could make it difficult for us. Most disappointing being the issues in California, with the liens being the most frustrating disappointment we faced in the industry right now. But yeah.
we'll get to that in more detail, hopefully. Talk to me. Tell me how you advise surrogates and how you all talk to surrogates about the journey and how to make it successful, or maybe things that they often don't think about.
Yeah, listen, we do, like I said, we have representation on all sides. The people who are onboarding our surrogates, right? They themselves have experience in this process. Like most of our surrogate coordinators have done it multiple times. So they're able to really walk them through what this process looks like for them, right? And I think that's a key component because we don't try to shy away from the high highs and the low lows in the process. And I think a lot of times people come in with rose-colored glasses, which I want them to, right? I think that hope is probably the most key element in this entire process. We can spend, I spend 99% of my day thinking about what can go wrong when 10% of the time it does, right? I reserve very little time thinking about what can go right when 90% of the time it goes right.
Right.
Um, we talk to surrogates about what that looks like so that they are prepared because it is taxing, right? They know pregnancy. Pregnancy, they're coming here because they know pregnancy. And if they don't know pregnancy, then they're not qualified. So it's already they're out at that point. But if they know pregnancy, they understand the highs and lows of that. I think what we try to get them to understand is the highs and lows of doing it for someone else, right? And in particular, the IVF part of this process, because that most surrogates, there are some that have gone through IVF for themselves, right? But most surrogates don't know that part of the process. So it's really about educating them on what can go right and what can go wrong in those situations and to not feel as though you did something wrong. So we really try to be supportive from the beginning on education. Education is the key component in our agency for everybody involved. And we really try to educate the surrogates from the beginning.
Education and communication and trust. Those are good. Those are good pillars. But let's talk about egg donors. How do you all advise, or what unique advice would you have for egg donors?
I think for egg donors, obviously, we're capturing people at a certain point in right? Ideal optimal egg donor between 21 and 29, right? So I know what I was like when I was 21, is a very different person than who I am today, right? So I think part of our education there is making sure they understand what this process is and the intention behind it, right? Going back to what I said a couple times, we're creating human life here, right? So I don't want it to get I'm not saying, I think the majority of donors are coming into this knowing what the intention behind that is, but we really like to make sure that they know that this is not just, something that's helping them with a college loan or anything like that. It extends beyond that, and their participation in that is a key important fact. So I think we definitely educate egg donors on what that means for them, what this decision they're making at a young age might indicate for them as they age and learn, right? So we just try to educate them as best we can.
Great advice. When you think about the families, the journey they're on is amazing, but the surrogates and donors who help make it possible is just what they do is beautiful, right?
Yeah. We're I don't maybe we are unique. I don't know if we are. We met our egg donor after everything was said and done. Like we had met through the agency, right? We had done all of that stuff. I remember when we were doing it, we asked some questions, and I remember the agency representative at the time being like, because we were asking questions about, oh, what part of LA are you in, right? And not because we were like trying to find her or anything, but just because we're just casual conversationalists here. And then we ended up meeting her after everything was said and done. And then she ended up flying out with her mother. She met our son, right? So she was able to do that. We then saw 2.5 years later, she had her own daughter. So we got to see that as well. And then we just added our daughter to the mix back in November. So I'm a big advocate for the women involved in this and being able to maintain that dynamic if everybody's open to it, right? And the same with our surrogates, right? We were very fortunate to have two amazing women. And I know people say surrogates are amazing. It's because guess what? They are. Uh, but I mean, it's one of those things, right? I say, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Well, I don't know that as a gay man that I will ever be able to fully place myself in a woman's shoes who is pregnant. But it doesn't mean I can't appreciate what they're putting their bodies through and what they're doing for us, right? And God, I'm 5 years in, and even on match calls, when I end the call, I end every call showing my appreciation to the surrogates. If it works out, awesome. Even if it doesn't, the fact that this is something that they even considered to do for someone else speaks volumes about who they are as a person. Also highlights for me what good they'll be doing in the world because other people around them are getting to see through osmosis what these women are willing to do for families like ours. And it just still to this day gets me emotional because it is not lost on me that we have the privilege in life to create human life, right? And to be a part in that is really, really cool. Right. So I think that, I don't know, everyone holds a special place in my heart to this day. And everybody who we've worked with does as well. So.
Yeah, sometimes people who aren't as close to the industry or don't know the people, the amazing people in the industry or making this all possible, say, well, gosh, the surrogates are compensated. They're doing it for the money. I always say the compensation is part of it, but these surrogates aren't doing it for the money. They're doing it to be part of a cohort of amazing women who helped a family, and and they're not truly compensated for what they're doing. They're doing it. They have to also want to do it to help a family, or it doesn't make sense, right?
Well, I talk about that all the time, right? Listen, there is compensation. It gets confusing people, right? Because it's easy to say, well, somebody's being compensated for it, so that must be why they're doing it. That's a easy out, right? But if there's anything I've learned in life, there are very few easy outs. And
Right.
there's the fact is they are compensated, right? That's a fact, right? But the money that they're getting is going to help them with something. It is not a life-changing sum of money to where their world is being completely upended. It's going to help them with something that is important to them and their family. And I think absolutely that's something that they should get. And I don't think people do this just because of that, because they're doing it because they want to be a part of something bigger, right? Part of
Right.
life. It's like, listen, it's like the person who volunteers at the soup kitchen. Not everyone's doing that, but some people find joy from doing that, right? So to think that, to get it mixed up with the financial component of it and think that that's the only reason anyone's doing that is just such a falsehood and that's such a disservice, I think, to the industry. I always say to people, if that's the perception you have, right? I understand because that's what the world and anytime you hear about surrogacy, that's a lot of what you hear, right? But I think when you meet the person, right, and you have a call with the surrogate, you have a match meeting with the surrogate, all of a sudden like, oh, man, they're normal people, right? Like, and all of a sudden, every sort of distrust or thought you had about this process all of a sudden just dissipates. It happened twice for us on our personal journey, and I've watched it. I've visually watched it happen many times on match calls, and then talked about it after, and I was like, I was right. Yeah, okay, thank you. So yeah, it is. It extends far beyond the financial component. It is again a mutual participation in the creation of human life.
Yeah, and I think a good agency, and again, I run an escrow company. I don't know a lot about the agency side, but it seems to me like a good agency is going to flush out anybody that's just in it for the money or that's not in it for the right reasons. And that's a big element of value an agency adds.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that part of our job is to be a filter, right? I'm not letting everybody through, right? That's not the intention that I have or that our agency has is saying, hey, you want to be a surrogate? Great. You're stamp of approval, right? There's a lot that goes into it, right? There's a lot of just standard processes that you have to do whenever you're onboarding someone from a medical perspective, from a psychological perspective, from a background, criminal background history, all those little elements. But part of our job is the social element of it, right? And that's a significant part of our job is to analyze the individual and decide, is this person someone we could see being a positive participant in a journey? Because my intention, and I say this anytime I'm talking to intended parents, and I know our coordinators say it for the surrogates as well, we want to make a good match, right? Our intention is to make a good match because
Yeah.
if LGBTs are happy and the surrogate is happy, the health of the baby will benefit from that. And selfishly, our job should be easier because having to manage crisis, right? We're there to support when something goes wrong in the journey. We're there to support, the milestones, to give advice on next steps, to do all of those things. But we're not managing the relationship because we want you guys to be matched in a way in which that relationship clicks, right? Can I say it happens every single time? No, because nothing is a perfect science, right? You get a beautiful 4AA embryo. You get a lining that gets trilaminar and gets just to the right thickness that you want it to be, and you don't find success, right? So obviously there are things that even in an ideal circumstance don't work out perfectly. But our intention from the beginning is to match people appropriately so everybody comes out a winner in the process. And part of doing that is just analyzing what is the surrogate's intention in this process. And here's the thing, the reality is it's very few people that get disqualified because of that, right? Most of the people get disqualified just simply because of their medical history, right? That's really the ultimate qualifier. I mean, the number one qualifier is that some people apply and they've never had a baby, right? There's that right out the gate. That's not going to work. But I think the women that are choosing to do this with their life have done their research and are really actively choosing to do this for more than just the money. So
No, I completely agree. I'd be remiss. You talk to clients all the time that are considering the process. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what are some common misunderstandings or questions that come up about escrow?
I knew it was coming. You have to ask. Otherwise, what's the purpose? No.
Had to
Uh,
ask.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, you guys don't have a lot going for you, not you specifically, but the escrow in terms of fairly recent news, right? So I think that that has a lot to do with it. It's triggering whenever you see news stories about escrow companies that literally vanished overnight and took millions of dollars from people, right? So I think it's already difficult to realize that the process costs as much as it does. And then to layer onto that you're giving all of that money, not all at once, but a big chunk at one period of time to a third party, right? And saying, you're going to keep this safe, right? Is
Right.
scary. So I think that it's getting people to understand that the bad players exist, right? But it's about us as an agency and our experience from working with providers about seeking out people who are trusted providers in the industry, right? I mean, that's just case in point, making sure that they are qualified, that they're licensed properly, that they're bonded, that they have all of these aspects that make a solid escrow company, and just educating intended parents on that. And of course, also relying on the third-party escrow companies to educate them as well. But just providing that base understanding, because I think that people are afraid to give all of their money to a third party that they have no control over, right? And I think it's getting them to understand that with the appropriate escrow company, there are protections in place.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that a core of an escrow company has to be security, right? And making sure the funds are held and managed in a secure manner. There, when I look to the issues where there was wrongdoing, these are bad actors, right? And bad actors can exist and do exist in every industry. I just think when it happens in our industry, it hits harder. It's what we do is so personal, and and to me, it starts with setting a higher standard and then verifying and then and educating. So what we do at SeedTrust is I set what I think is the gold standard of the absolute extreme of security and service. And my goal in that is that I want that to become the norm, not the exception in time. Because if other operators that hold escrow feel that pressure to rise closer to where we're setting the bar, it protects people further. I also think, when it comes to a financial company or it comes to any institution managing money, there needs to be a minimal component of security, checks and balances, bonding, audits, just to make sure it's a good recommendation. And if that happens, it limits the chance of bad actors, right? What I've been doing this, SeaTrust has been in business for 10 years as of next week.
Hey,
which is really cool. And we serve 30,000 families, which is just mind blowing to me. But what I've learned in that process is what we do, and I came from banking, right? So some of the stuff when I talk about it, it's like as boring as watching paint dry, because I'm like a financial security nerd. Like this is the stuff that gets me excited, checks and balances and all these things. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is what we do in escrow is quite complex. If we're not just holding money and sending it, we're verifying receipts, we're checking contracts, we're managing disputes. It can be quite involved. And what happens in some cases is the operator is just not sophisticated enough to do it.
yeah.
Right. And then they get in over their head and they didn't steal the money, but they're just not run properly. And we see that often when we take over books that are problems.
General
But
mis, right? It's not even malicious sometimes. Sometimes it's just mismanagement, right?
yeah, so I think, look, I think when it comes to that, just make sure the escrow company's qualified. Look at the leadership team, look at their staff, and make sure they have the basic legal, financial, accounting backgrounds and the proper security to verify. Right? I
What
mean,
does it mean? What, I think maybe people might want to hear it. What does it mean to be bonded, right? What is that protection that that offers?
that's a great question. Yeah, so when it comes to an escrow company, you'll go around and look at websites and you'll see different things reported. People talk about bonds, people talk about their general liability, their cyber, their errors and omission, their FDIC insurance. All of those things matter, right? I don't want to say the rest of them don't matter, but the one that really matters in a financial company, in an escrow company, is the bond.
Hmm.
And it can be called a bond or it can be called a crime policy, a crime insurance policy. It's the one place in insurance and bonding where the terms are interchangeable, fidelity bond and crime policy. What that does, and it's the only one of those policies that protects clients against theft of their funds. So what that does is if one of my employees is able to breach my checks and balances and five-step approval process, in my case, it would take four people colluding. It would still get caught in the audit, but if those four people somehow colluded and stole the money, or I stole the money I'd have to collude as well because I don't have access to it as the president. But then the bond would pay out on that. It's going to protect clients from theft. The other thing about the bond and the reason why I think it's the most important is in our case, we have 100 million. We think a minimal for anybody holding money should be 10 million. And the reason a $10 million bond is meaningful is because that's where insurance companies really start to deepen their underwriting and their analysis. And what does an insurance company do? What is their expertise? Their expertise is underwriting risk.
Mhm.
So for an escrow company or a trust company, these are also used interchangeably. For them to go to an insurance company and get that insurance company to underwrite and place a $10 million bond or bet on them means they went through rigorous underwriting, and it means they probably have the right financial protections in place and the right checks and balances and all of that. So it's a great indication that the companies run well and by good people that don't have criminal backgrounds. When you bump up to where we set the bar at 100 million, I'm underwritten by 20 insurance companies that are making $100 million bet that looked into our processes and procedures to say SeedTrust is secure.
Hmm.
And to me, the bond is there for the worst case scenario. And hopefully it's never used, but it's also there as an indication that this is a real sophisticated company you should trust because it's underwritten and has that compliance. And to get to that level, you have to have things like audits and checks and balances and professional staff and reporting that makes the insurance companies comfortable.
You mentioned auditing, which is one of the things I do appreciate about you guys, is that you do have a third party company that comes in and audits for you. So it's not just an internal audit, which I'm sure you're doing as well, but it's an external audit, which I think is really key in any industry, is to have a non-biased third party come in and actually do an analysis of things. So I think that's valuable too. But one of the things you mentioned that I am curious to learn more about, if there's intention behind it, or if it's just somebody won't give you $100 million, is you said you have like 20 that basically are combined. Is the logic, again, just adding and thinking about an additional layer of security would be if one of those goes belly up as well, that you're kind of protected on a lot of different angles. and just with the support that you have. Like, say if all of it was in one, and then that industry just imploded on itself, I would imagine that would be pretty impactful.
Yeah, I like the diversity in our stack in bond. In bond, I think they're all written under the lead policy, so they have to kind of follow the structure of the policy. So you don't have the complexity of 20 different policies per se. They're all stacking. So the stacking of the insurance companies remove doesn't create complexity in that it's 20 different policies, it's one, but it does create some diversification, which I like. The other thing is more eyes on the business and more people underwriting the business, the better, because it creates that oversight and that view or those questions that make us think about the business differently. But also just there's no comp even the largest insurance companies in the country and they underwrite us and they do back us. They don't have that bandwidth to put out $100 million risk on one client. So that's why I think actually our bond program is one of the largest in the country, period. Even beyond just and even just beyond surrogacy, it's not common. It's something we decided to do years ago to kind of lead the way for the industry to make it more secure. And also auditing and sharing the results of the audit publicly is something we led the way on, not because it was typical or common in escrow companies, because we thought it was the right thing to do to make people feel safe, and to know they can trust in the process and the people behind it. And what's fun about that is we lead the way on some of those initiatives. Again, the smaller operators that may be a little bit less secure, have a little bit less sophistication now say, well, gosh, we have to do it too. It's the right thing to do. And people start to get educated. What breaks my heart when I see the issues that happen is they're totally avoidable if people were just educated. And sometimes people say, well, gosh, I picked that escrow company because they were $100 cheaper or $200 cheaper. And or because they liked the person. And I always reiterate when it comes to a financial company, you want to like the people and the company, and you want to make sure they're going to be a good custodian throughout and there for you, but also make sure they're qualified and secure. Because every time a fraud happens, SeedTrust donates our services and steps in to help all those families, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So just, I would always say don't compromise. It's not, there's areas to allow for boutique operators or people who, and financial companies is not one. You wouldn't work with a doctor or a lawyer who wasn't licensed.
Right.
You need to make sure that the company is qualified. And if you do that and you ask the right questions, and then you won't have issues. And I think, I imagine that Same Love was able to dodge a lot of those issues in the industry.
We are very fortunate that we did not have any caught up in any of that loss. So grateful for that. And yeah, very fortunate. There's yeah, because I know a lot of people had to deal with a lot during that time. And obviously, my heart goes out to all of the parents that lost it, right? And the surrogates as well that weren't being paid out for the amazing things that they're doing and all of those things, right? It's just really difficult, especially, bringing it back full circle to the middle class aspect of things, where
Yep.
that was their savings, right? And they chose to not buy a house. They chose to, go through this process and they chose to put their money towards creating their family. And then to have that taken away from you, it's just yeah, it just speaks volumes. Don't go and try to save $100 here or there. There are things that are much more valuable than that. And just to do your research, right? I mean, I know we talked a bit about vibe, right? I think that that's obviously something we leaned into. But part of it is also just doing research and looking at what other people are saying about the industry and about that particular player in the industry. So I think that's a key component as well. Yeah,
Yeah, the escrow component was created, I don't know, 40 years ago to create a fairness of how the money was held, but or a safe place for the money to be held, to sure it could be distributed. It's been interesting. When we came into the space, we said escrow could do more, right? It should be tech enabled, it should be transparent, it should be secure. But more importantly, we said that back then it was escrow companies that sent out a monthly ledger and put a check in the mail. And they didn't take any responsibility to verify anything. And And coming from the banking world, and my partner coming as one was an attorney and another CPA, we said this is like an illusion of security. The escrow company should have to check and verify that the payment should go out. And so what's evolved over the what I found what's evolved now to be the norm that we've created as the norm is like the escrow company's playing this instrumental role to, and I think I liken it to fairness, right? Like the money should be the financial terms in the contract, the money should be held securely and administered per the contract. So neither side has an unfair advantage or the ability to kind of use the money in an unfair way. They should just be pay or be paid per the contract. It's important to the parents to make sure the money and only what they agree to is paid or they agree to after is paid out. And the surrogate should make sure that her funds are there and she gets what's due and that she's not putting her own credit at risk because a medical bill is not getting paid or something. So, it's complex. I think people I always find like when I talk to people like we'll probably be at the Men Having Babies conference together and people aren't interested in talking about escrow. They got bigger decisions to make, right? They're picking their agency, they're picking their doctor, they're picking their attorney.
Yeah.
And we seek to make escrow an afterthought and the financial component easy, but people do need to make sure they get to a secure provider. We've seen the outcome. The risk is too high.
Yeah, I mean, it is a key component, right? Because without the money, there's not a path forward, right? So it's about making sure that the money that you've worked to save to make sure this dream come true is protected and safe. And I think that's why, we do work and have a lot of cases together is because we have done our due diligence and we still encourage intended parents and surrogates to do theirs and egg donors to do theirs. But we feel confident in the providers that we've aligned with in all categories, and escrow is one of them. And so we are grateful for the changes and the efforts and your vision for what you think the industry should be like, not just for your own company, but for the industry as a whole. So thank you for being an advocate for all of those things.
What we do in this industry is so meaningful. And as you alluded to earlier, bad press or bad actors hurts our entire field. But more importantly, it hurts the prospects of that next family that wants to have a family. That's their dream. And when there's bad actors or negative press or somebody acting unprofessionally, it hurts. It hurts the chance of people being able to continue to benefit from what we do, and it's important.
Yeah, so everybody do right. If there's a takeaway,
Yeah,
do right by people, right?
yeah.
Be good people in the world, right? Make good change. And we are again creating human life. And I hope that we don't lose our humanity in the creation of that and that people are good in their intentions. Because I think if we do that, then this industry has the ability to change a lot of people's lives. If we don't do that, then we rob the ability for a lot of people to have their lives changed, like me and my husband have, and like the 700 plus people we've helped, right? And the births that we've had. So
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. If somebody's interested to learn more about Same Love or get to know you better, what's the best way to do that?
you can absolutely, egg donor, surrogate, intended parent. You can just go to our website, samelovesurrogacy.com. Pretty simple. And then just click on your appropriate tab, and there'll be contact information there, a quick little questionnaire that you can fill out to determine whether or not you are qualified or not, if you're an egg donor or surrogate. And then we are more than happy to do consultations with people. We do a lot of consultations in a given week, and we love it. We love it because every single conversation is different. Everybody is at a different stage in their life. They're coming with different questions. So there is no one size fits all. So we welcome participation. You can also check us out on Instagram, Same Love Surrogacy underscore. We have an underscore at the end. I'm not in charge of social media. I don't know who added the underscore, but that's how you can find us. And you can follow along there. We post a lot of content about the families that we're helping, the surrogates and the egg donors that are helping them. So definitely check us out there. And then we also go to conferences, so you might catch us at an upcoming like Men Having Babies conference or some other conferences that we attend around the world. So yeah, we're always happy to have you grab our ear and have a conversation. Don't actually grab our ear, that's pretty painful. Me too.
Well, we've had the pleasure of working alongside of you all and the agency and on a lot of cases, and I could say the work you do is amazing, and you have a lot of happy clients. And I know the spirit and what you're conveying today is how you all operate and how you serve your journeys throughout. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and keep doing the amazing work you do.
Awesome. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.